The Bangladesh High Court has refused to ban ISKCON amid huge uproar over a Hindu monk's arrest. Meanwhile, at least 30 individuals have been detained in the country's Chattogram area. They are alleged to have played a role in the killing of lawyer Saiful Islam and attacking security personnel during protests over the arrest of Hindu priest Chinmoy Krishna Das Brahmachari. A ceasefire between Israel and the Lebanese militant group Hezbollah that began Wednesday appears to be holding. This as residents in cars heaped with belongings are streaming back towards southern Lebanon despite earlier warnings from Israeli and Lebanese troops underlining they stay away from certain areas. According to Gaza's health authorities, the death toll from the ongoing Israeli attacks in the enclave has risen to 44,282, with over 104,000 injured. In the past 24 hours alone, Israeli military operations in Gaza caused 33 deaths and 134 injuries, according to the statement. The Israeli Defense Forces continue to carry out military operations in multiple places across the Gaza Strip. 3 people were killed and 1 seriously injured early Wednesday when a Tesla Cybertruck crashed and caught fire in Northern California. The Piedmont Police Chief, Jeremy Bowers, said speed was likely a factor in the single vehicle collision, but added that authorities would continue to investigate the circumstances of the tragedy. Listen in. China is reportedly eyeing to launch more military drills in the coming days near Taiwan. The country's security officials opine Beijing is reportedly using President Lai Ching-te's upcoming visits to the Pacific and scheduled U.S. transit as a pretext. The Australian Senate has debated a ban on children younger than 16 years old using social media. This after the House of Representatives overwhelmingly supported the age restriction. The bill would make platforms like TikTok, Facebook, Snapchat and X liable for fines of up to 50 million Australian dollars for systematic failures to prevent young children from holding accounts.
The core focus of this legislation is simple. It demands that social media companies take reasonable steps to identify and remove underage users from their platforms. This is a responsibility these companies should have been fulfilling long ago, but for too long they have shirked these responsibilities in favour of profit. This is not a radical concept, it's a necessary one.
Relatives of protesters detained during Venezuela's post-election crackdown held a vigil on Wednesday at the headquarters of the Bolivarian National Intelligence Service. Thousands of people were detained during and after the deadly protest that follows Venezuela's disputed July presidential election. Protesters took to the streets chanting, "Freedom to those who are imprisoned for fighting." Listen in.
Hoy yo quiero que acudamos a la oración, a Dios Todopoderoso. Hoy es día de la Virgen de la Milagrosa. Vamos a pedirle a ella que nos haga el milagro, que tengamos una Navidad sin presos políticos y que nos dé la libertad que necesitamos en este país.
Venezuela's President Nicolas Maduro has announced the creation of a new honor for the officials who had been targeted by U.S. sanctions following the country's disputed elections. Washington imposed sanctions on an additional 21 Maduro aides, accusing them of perpetrating some of the repression with which officials in the country responded to July's election. They joined a list of dozens of sanctioned Venezuelans that includes ministers, prosecutors, and even the head of the country's high court. Take a look.
Que nadie se equivoque con Venezuela. Nadie se equivoque con Venezuela. Venezuela seguirá su camino de independencia, construyendo su propio modelo político, social, económico, cultural, militar, nuestro propio modelo. No seremos esclavos de nadie.
A 2-year-old was killed and 4 adults injured from multiple gunshot wounds in Tennessee's Jackson. The local PD responded to reports of shots fired in the area of Wallace Road on Tuesday at approximately 3:55 p.m. local time. Upon arrival, they discovered that the 5 individuals suffering multiple gunshot wounds inside an SUV. Police confirmed that the 2-year-old child succumbed to the injuries and an individual of interest is in custody. Further investigation is underway. Former TV host Charlie Rose has settled a sexual harassment lawsuit brought by 3 women in the wake of his Me Too era ouster from CBS News in 2017 and the cancellation of his long-running eponymous PBS talk show. Lawyers for Rose and the women, younger employees who accused him of predatory behavior and blatant repeated sexual harassment, filed court papers this week confirming that the lawsuit has been resolved. UK's Prince William on Wednesday handed out awards at the Tusk Conservation Awards ceremony in London. Among others, he presented the Prince William Award for Conservation in Africa to Nomba Name and the Tusk Award for Conservation in Africa to Edward Aruna. Here's more.
I believe we are the lucky ones. We live in a world in which incredible wildlife exists. And I want that for the generations that follow. I want my children to live in a world where swallows still migrate, gorillas still live in the cloud forests of Uganda, and rhinos still roam the arid rangelands of Namibia. It'll be thanks to extraordinary leaders such as those that we are celebrating today that this will happen.
Shenyang City in China's northeast Liaoning province has welcomed the return of the remains of 43 more Chinese People's Volunteers martyrs. They died during the war to resist US aggression and aid Korea. In recent days, many billboards, outdoor electronic screens, bus stations, and various places in Shenyang were decorated with slogans and posters to welcome the return of the remains of the fallen soldiers from South Korea. Uruguay's President-elect Yamandu Orsi met with current President Luis Lacalle to discuss the country's transition of power. Speaking after the meeting, Orsi said the pair discussed the transition of power and the doors would remain quote-unquote wide open throughout. Orsi's new government will assume power on the 1st of March next year. American rapper Sean Diddy Combs was denied bail again on Wednesday ahead of his May sex trafficking trial. The judge cited evidence that he poses a quote-unquote serious risk of witness tampering and has attempted, in fact, to hide prohibited communication with third parties while in custody. 2 other judges previously had agreed with prosecutors that the Bad Boy Records founder was a danger to community if he is not behind bars. The massive helium balloons that will float through New York City for Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade have been filled with the gas ahead of the big event. Dozens of workers and volunteers will in fact help inflate the stars of the show on Wednesday. This year, 17 giant character balloons will travel from Manhattan's Upper West Side to Macy's Herald Square flagship store on the 34th Street, alongside floats, performers, marching bands, and much more. In the remotest reaches of Alaska, there's no relying on DoorDash to have Thanksgiving dinner, or any other dinner for that matter of fact, delivered. But some residents living well off the grid will nevertheless have turkeys brought in, well, by air. Esther Kim flies low and slow in a small airplane over rural parts of south-central Alaska, dropping frozen turkeys to people living in roadless Alaska. Listen in to Kim.
I grew up in the bush, in the rural Alaska, so there's no roads. The only way that you can get there is by airplane, by snowmobile, or boat if you're on the river system. And so during freeze up, during Thanksgiving time, everyone is stuck.
The U.S. Federal Trade Commission has opened a broad antitrust investigation into Microsoft. The probe reportedly covers the company's software licensing and cloud computing businesses. The investigation was approved by FTC Chair Lina Khan ahead of a likely departure in January. The election of Donald Trump as U.S. president and the expectation he will appoint a fellow Republican with a softer approach towards business leaves the outcome of the investigation up in the air for now. Toyota Motors' global output has dropped for the 9th consecutive month in October. The output was dragged lower by big falls in production in the United States and China, but the decline was mild compared to previous months. The world's biggest automaker also logged its first rise in 5 months for global sales, which grew 1.4% to 903,000 vehicles, a record for the month of October.